Project 3. Project 3 is just a modification of Project 2 with some additional while loops in here to allow the error checks we had before to loop whenever the user has entered some invalid inputs. It also, there's new while loops to have it where the user can just continue the program again when they finish, or if they just want to end it. So the first variable we have here is a Boolean variable called repeat program, and then we set it to true. And this variable is going to determine if the program will restart or if it's just going to end. So while it's true, which is obviously true, we're gonna have this whole the whole program execute. The entire program is under this one while loop. So that's why when it gets set to false, this while loop will no longer be true, and this program won't even execute anymore. So while it's true, we're going to execute everything inside here. And so the first three things are some new Boolean variables called checked invalid customer code, checked invalid meter value, and ask user to continue. The reason why I defined these variables inside the first while loop was because these values might get modified later, and when they get modified, they need to reset back to their original values when we loop the program again. So if we were to put these outside in here, and then we modify the value, it's not gonna reset to its default value of false and true. So checked invalid customer code is false. So while it's false, while checked customer code is false, which is true, we're going to try, and we're going to ask the user for their customer code. And if the user doesn't put a customer code that is part of the valid characters, so like if they don't put an R or C, an I, or the capital versions of those, then it's going to keep on asking them to put in a valid character for their customer code. It's going to keep asking them until they put something in. And once they put something invalid, so if they put C, which is a valid character, it's going to say that checked invalid customer code is true, which means that this while loop will no longer execute, and they can continue on. If they don't put anything valid, in there, it's going to remain false, and the while loop is just going to keep looping. Now, if they put something completely invalid, like a number or a float, then this exception is going to be raised. So except a value error, and it's a value error because we're looking for a string input, and if we get something like an integer or a float, that is not going to be. It's going to raise a value error, and it's going to also ask to enter a valid character, and it's going to go back up top here and repeat this whole thing again until they put in something that will make this true. Now, we do the exact same thing for the meter values. So while checked invalid meter is false, which is true, it is false, we're going to ask the user to put in an integer input for their beginning meter. And while the beginning meter is outside of the valid range, so while it's negative, or while it's above 999 whatever, while it's above that, we're going to say that you put in an invalid entry, and you need to put in a new beginning meter value. It's going to keep asking them this until they finally put in something that is within the valid range, so something between 0 and 999 million or whatever. We do the same thing for the ending meter. We're going to ask them for the ending meter reading, and while the ending meter is outside of the valid range, we're going to keep asking them to put something in that is part of this valid range. And when they finally put in a valid beginning meter and a valid ending meter, then we're going to say that checked invalid meter value is true, which would mean that this while loop will no longer execute. Now, the same thing we did above here, we're going to accept a value error, except this time a value error would be raised if they insert something other than an integer. So if they insert a string like the letter P, or if they put in a float like the value 1/2, then this exception will execute and telling them that they need to enter a valid integer for the meters, which would cause this to loop again, and it's going to ask them again. So after that, the rest right here is all just the old stuff we had, all the calculations for the output. So we're just going to skip this. So right after the user gets their summary of what their customer code was, what their meter reading was, how many gallons they used, and what their bill was, right after all of that, we're going to have we're going to ask the user, do they want to continue the program again, or if they just want to end the program and stop using it. So we have this variable called ask user to continue, which was like we said in the beginning, was set to true right here. Ask user to continue is true. So while that was true, we're going to have we're going to ask the user, would you like to continue the program? Y for yes, N for no. This is under a variable called continue program. So it's going to say, would you like to continue the program? Y for yes, N for no. So if continue program, if the user inserted y or inputted y, or if they put in lowercase y, then we're going to set ask user to continue equal to false, so that this while loop will no longer execute. And then we're going to set repeat program to true. It was already true, so the program will continue to execute. If they didn't put in y or lowercase y, then we're going to check, did they put in n or did they put in lowercase n? And if that's the case, then it's going to print, thank you for using the program, goodbye. And it's going to set ask user to continue to false, so this while loop will no longer execute, and it's going to set repeat program equal to false. And if repeat program is equal to false, then this very first while loop that has everything inside of it is not going to be true anymore, which means that nothing inside here will execute anymore. So it ends the program. Now if they didn't put in n or y at all, if they put in something completely different, like just like literally anything else, right? Like an integer float or a character that's not y or n, then we're going to ask them, please enter y for yes or n for no. And then it's going to set ask user to continue equal to true, which might be a little redundant. I'm not sure if we need this here, but when ask user to continue is true, that means that this while loop has to execute again until they finally insert something that that would either cause it to be false. Yeah, so when they finally enter something, that will actually go through these two if statements. So let's make some output. So we've put in something old here. Now this executes just normally, but now we have a would you like to continue the program statement at the end. So if we say yes, then it's going to ask us for new values. And then if we say, would you like to continue the program, and we say n, or lowercase n, then it's going to say, thank you for using the program, goodbye, and it ends. Now let's check some invalid input. Oops. So let's say we put in something that wasn't part of those valid. So instead of putting something like I or R or C, we're going to put in O. It's going to say, yeah, please enter a valid character. If we put in something like 2, it's going to say the same thing until we put in something valid. Now let's put in something outside the range for the meters. So -1. It's going to say you put in something valid for that. Let's put something like 5. Oh no, let's put in the character like L. Obviously that's going to be wrong until we put in some valid integers for the meters. So let's put in normal. Same thing for the ending meter. And it still executes. Do you want to continue program? No. Actually, let's try something. Maybe. Obviously that's not going to be a valid entry,